Welcome, Shanondoah, to the Planners on Purpose podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is great. I've been just kind of looking at your podcast. I know you have a podcast and you've had a significant amount of time in the event industry. So I definitely would love for my listeners to learn a little bit more about you. So why don't we start in terms of where did you get your start in the industry? Like, did you fall into the event industry or did you plan to be here?
So I'm one of the planners. I plan to
Okay.
plan. So first got my first taste in high school. I was on prom committee and I was the treasurer and I was like, this is amazing. And then for a few years, I thought I wanted to be a wedding planner because I thought that was how you did events, is through parties. And then after school, graduated and went to Australia on a working holiday and came back and needed a job. And I started as a receptionist at a software company on a
Wow.
contract and started to get a taste of corporate events and realized, oh, there's a whole other side to this
A whole
industry,
world.
a whole world that I had never considered. That I think this is where I'm meant to be. So from there, I went back to school, got my event management certificate, got my marketing certificate, and then have just been kind of building on the experiences of that throughout my career. Now I have, over a decade in tech planning events, which is kind of crazy for someone with an English degree, but it is. So I don't know that I planned that part, but I knew that events was something I loved, and it was just trying to
Right.
figure out how do I make it into a viable career.
That's awesome. I mean, usually you get people that, oh, I just fell into it. For me, I'm one of those fall into it. Pretty early in my career, I fell into it, but you never get too many people that say they planned on being here. So I think
Yeah.
that's awesome. So where are you, what do you do currently in your current role in the event industry?
So currently I work for another software company. I'm on the marketing team there and managing our customer facing and prospect facing events, as well as some internal events. I find that oftentimes I'm on a marketing team that gets pulled into doing internal events because they're like, hey, you know how to do events. So, our user conference, our revenue driving events, as well as a lot of trade shows. We participate in a lot of trade shows. So it's, getting our teams organized to equip them to sell and support our customers.
That's great. So what is your current like, what do you love about what you're doing right now and where you are right now in your event career?
Well, I think that the most important part of where you are in your career is your team. And if
Mm,
you're on a great team, things are great. And if you're not, it's usually not
yeah.
very great. So I'm very, very fortunate to be working on a really great and supportive team. We really work together. We understand kind of why we're doing events, and
Mhm.
having a team that really understands the possibilities that come with events. And then it's just, I love being able to try different experiences. So, recently I said, hey, I think I want to do an event at a planetarium. And they said, okay, let pull together a proposal, see what happens, right? So, being able to have that structure, but also once in a while getting into something a little more creative, dipping our toe and, oh, how can we make this different or better or change it from last year, or give our new attendees something to be
Mhm.
excited about.
Yeah, I think creativity is so important, especially when it comes to your team. You never really want to feel locked in, especially as a planner. We are highly creative beings. So that's wonderful that you're able to just be so creative while having a team structure.
For sure. I think it's so important. I love having a great team that you can really bounce ideas off of.
Mhm.
I a few months ago I went to my team and I said, is dinner in a Ferris wheel cool, or have I just been looking at it too long and I'm actually crazy, right? So just things like that, to be able to say, okay, well, how would that work? And is it the right audience? And yes, that's crazy, but we should still do it. That kind of thing, to have someone who can say, great idea, or no, no, get off the
Maybe
internet.
we
You
should
need
look at that.
you need to take a step back. You've gone down a rabbit hole.
Oh,
We need
funny.
to pull you back in.
So where did you land on that? Did you do
We
dinner
didn't
and
end up
affairs for?
doing it, but
Okay.
not because we didn't like it. It was
Okay.
just not the right. But one day you will see me do an event at a Ferris wheel. Now that I know it exists, but it just was like, oh, the timing and the
Right.
what we need to do for this event doesn't align with a Ferris wheel. But one day
One
I
day it
will
will
do it.
happen. It will have
Yeah,
Shanondoah's name
exactly.
all over it. I think that's awesome. So what would you say, when we talk about like career journeys and, you've had over a decade of experience, what would you say your milestone or turning points were in your career? Because we have a lot of people that listen to the podcast that they're still on their journey and maybe they want to get to where you are. What are the milestones or the decisions that you made to get to where you are now?
Yeah, I think that, like I said, when I kind of realized, oh, there's this other side, that was a really big kind of turning point of, okay, well, now what do I do next? Right.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to really kind of double down on events. And I think, for those who are early in their careers, especially if it is something you're exploring and maybe wasn't the role you were hired to do, is telling someone that you're interested in it, right? So
Mhm.
telling, your boss or your team or maybe other parts of the company, depending on how large your company is, to say, hey, I want to be more involved. So, I would do our smaller corporate events, but then would also volunteer on our social committee and, really kind of put yourself out there. And then I think anytime that, I took a new role, I know a big milestone for me was when event was actually in my title. That felt very exciting. Like,
Yeah.
okay, now I'm
I've
here.
made
I've
it.
made it, right? That's, it shows people that, I'm not doing other things. This is what I'm focused on. And then I think, the bigger your events get over your career, the more complex. That's at each milestone of when you say, oh, my budgets have now I'm dealing in the 6, 7 figures versus when I was dealing with smaller events. So I think like each of those is also a milestone in your career.
Yeah, I think that's definitely amazing, especially when you get event like corporate event planner, some type of event title in your name. That's definitely feels like you've made it. Um,
100%.
I see that you've gotten your CMP. How can you share how that has helped your career or how that has given you a sense of I don't know, just pride about the industry?
Sure. So I think that the CMP is probably one of the most important pieces of either designation or education you can do if you're going to stay in corporate events.
Yep.
I think that if you're in a role and you're going to be there a decade or two, you probably don't need it. But where it really comes in handy, I think, is in those earlier career parts of your career. And I know that for me, there were interviews that I got while job searching that I got because I was a CMP. I know that I was shortlisted. I interviewed with someone who said, I don't have my CMP, but I'm looking for CMPs because I know that you already have this baseline. I know that you're coming in and I don't need to teach you how to do a budget. I don't need to teach you
Yes.
how to do those things. I don't think having it or not having it makes you a better or worse or superior event planner. I think it just signals to others that you know the baseline at the bare minimum. And I think that when you're in a competitive job market, and someone gets 100, 200 resumes, it's an easy way to do a filter of say, okay, CMP was preferred, not required, but we have 200. How do we even start to look at this number? So I
Mhm.
think it was really, I know that it made a difference, especially in the job searching. I don't know that day to day you feel it as much, although sometimes I'll go look up something and be like, what is this meant to be, or what is this term? Like every once in a while I use the term gobo and I'm like, see, it my test did something, right?
Yeah.
So but if you're earlier in your career, I think as soon as you can get it, it is a
Mhm.
lot of money, especially if you're paying for yourself like I was, but I know that it did make a difference on the job search. And when I look at roles, you see that it's usually preferred, if not required, especially as you get into the bigger and bigger events and in like larger organizations, especially on the corporate end.
Yeah, I mean, and it does definitely does take the guessing out of things, for an employer. that you have that baseline of knowledge, and you don't have to talk about, okay, what is an event, or what is a podium, right? So I think that definitely, it helps kind of cut out a lot of that guessing, for sure. So I know you're an avid supporter in that, and I am too. So thank you so much for sharing about that, because it really helps you in your career, especially early on in your
Yeah,
career.
for sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
So I would love, to talk a little bit about stress and overwhelm, because I do like to really talk a lot about that on the podcast. So I would love it if you would share, just if you've ever struggled with stress or overwhelm in the event industry.
I mean, isn't
So
that
I mean,
like,
like,
is
yeah,
that,
it's a given. But I would
yeah,
love for
it's
you to share, like, how you get through the challenges of stress and overwhelm in your day-to-day work.
for sure. I think, being on the corporate side, we definitely have seasons. And I think knowing those seasons well makes a big difference. I mentioned to you today, it's a little quieter in my office this week,
Mhm.
so taking the time to, slow down a little bit when I can slow down, and not being like, well, now we need to do everything that starts in October. It's like, yeah, I can start on that. But, I can also grab a longer coffee today because it is a little quieter. I think, my husband will always tease me that he knows the seasons now of like October, don't bother asking me any questions. Try me in November, right? And May is the same. So I think preparing as much as you can to know, okay, these are going to be the busy times. How can I recharge or rest or get things done in the off season that then I don't need to worry about it? Try not to plan a major, maybe don't write your CMP in October, right? Like things
Yeah.
like that. Like just,
Yeah.
what can you avoid? And honestly, meditation really changed things.
Mhm.
I was so resistant for so long. Like, oh, it's not going to make a difference. I can't sit still. It's too much. And
Yeah.
I'm not, by no means am I an expert, but when I started doing it, my husband said to me, you've been sleeping better. And I was like, I know.
Mhm.
And almost begrudgingly, right? So I was noticing like that difference. And I think, I've talked to mental health experts in the events industry, and it's about realizing what fills your cup. And it's not the
Yeah.
same for everybody. For me, it is being around people. It makes me tired to be by myself. And,
Yeah.
if I have a night at home, I'm in bed by 9 o'clock because I'm just like, okay, I'm going to bed now. Right.
Mhm.
But for other people, they need that alone time. And,
Exactly.
figuring out, okay, is it reading a book? Is it running? Is it, not self-care and taking care of yourself and rest, it doesn't look the same for everybody. And so figuring out what works for you,
Mhm.
and doing more of that, and worrying less about what, someone else says, oh, you should be journaling, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And then all of a sudden your self-care list is longer than your actual list. you
Yeah.
know Test things out, figure out what works for you, and go from there.
Yeah, I love that you talk about awareness, because it definitely is important. And, I had to learn that the hard way, having planning my wedding, taking my CMP, and, starting a really, really major job. It all kind of came to a head, even though it was all good things. It was just a lot. So just knowing kind of where your seasons are, where you're taking on so much. And I love that your husband is like, okay, I see that you're kind of in the space of, working a lot. I'm going to lay off of questions or whatever happens at home. Because I feel like there's a trade-off, right? There's
For
not
sure.
necessarily work-life balance. Sometimes it's just a blending, and it's just how you blend it.
Yeah.
Blend
And
it
I think it's
well.
not even your spouse, or people you live with. It can be your friends, it can be your
Yeah.
family, to say, like, my friends kind of know that if you message me in a group chat during when I'm on site,
Yeah, I'm not
anything I've
answering.
agreed to, I cannot really be held responsible. Like I've definitely signed up for things that I'm like, yeah, yeah, sounds good. And then like 2 weeks later, someone's like,
You're like,
so about this thing that we're doing, I'm like,
you're
oh,
like, what
right.
thing?
So, letting the people, that anyone who's close to you, say like, okay, I actually need some time to get back
Mhm.
to you on that. Like, let me get through this event. Let me get through
Mhm.
the, like, today, especially because we're so instantaneous in our
Yeah.
responses to so many things, right? So like letting everyone in your life know, if this is not a great time for me to answer you or commit to anything, but I will get back to you and remind me if I forget, because
Yeah.
that could happen too once I come out of it.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like setting those boundaries for other people because they don't know what you have
Sure.
going on. So I think that's definitely helpful to just say, hey, I'm going through this season right now, so I'm going to have to not answer you back or not do the normal things that we do during this month and, get back to me next month. It
Yeah,
definitely is natural and normal for people to do that. Sometimes I just think people just try to do it all. And that's when you do meet a lot of overwhelm and you essentially can get burnt out.
for sure.
Yeah. So have you ever been in a situation that you've like flat out burned out, have to take a break?
I think I think probably yes. I think
Mhm.
it'd be hard to not, but I think you get better at learning when you need the help, right? And
Yeah.
especially if you work on a team, it's definitely harder for probably solo planners. Recently I had a friend who had to cancel dinner with me because her best friend called because the florist canceled the day before the wedding and she had to
Oh,
go help assemble flowers, right?
oh, good.
So I think it's, learning when what the signs are, right? When you're feeling overwhelmed and either talking to your boss or talking to a teammate to say, hey, like there's just too much going on. Cause also we all get busy, right? Whether
Mhm.
it's people you work with or people outside, and everyone kind of gets into their own thing and assume, oh, if I don't hear from you, especially with planners, I think because we often are very high achievers, we're doing our own thing. People kind of trust us to get things done.
Yeah.
They might not think to check in to say, hey, do you need some help with that? Or how are you doing for time? And so I think it's recognizing when you're like, okay, this is getting to be too much. And
Mhm.
I'm worried that something might be impacted, or being honest when you're planning out a calendar and saying, hey, like we already have 5-10 events that week.
Yeah.
Is there something we can pull back on? Is there something like,
Mhm.
people might not realize as things get added? So I think
Mhm.
it's just about being honest with yourself and with the people you work with, and about
Mhm.
what your capacities are. And I think
Mhm.
often event planners are used to saying yes, right? And knowing when to say no and how to say no properly and,
Mhm.
professionally, of course,
Mhm.
um, without can still do a lot of good if you say, hey, I can't take this on right now, and
Exactly.
here's why I need more time, or here's how we can do it next time, or maybe you can try doing a small thing of it. Like we've had that sometimes with some of our smaller shows. We might say, hey, we already have 10 shows this week and there's not enough people to go around to do it. So maybe you just attend this year and you tell us, hey, this was really worth being at, or no, you know what, we don't need to have a booth. We can just pay for a ticket and go. So I think it's about being honest with your team in a
Mhm.
professional way, and setting those expectations, and being clear about what you need and why you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's as a leader, sometimes it's about helping them help themselves. Because I can't tell you how many times, let's say I've had someone on my team say, "Oh, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it," but as a leader, that's lining up to be this many events on this particular week, and as much as you probably feel like you can do it, it's the signs are all pointing
Yeah,
towards it not going to be a good thing, and sure enough, that's what happens. So I think if you have that amount of trust on your team and you trust your leader and the leader trusts you, hopefully you can really kind of release control to that trust
sure.
and help each other out. Because yeah, I mean, doing events is really amazing, but then it can be equally as hard. So if we're all on the same team, we're all working for each other and we trust each other, we can just help look out for each other and help relieve stress overall.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I will just talk a little bit about just some of the events that you have planned and just those experiences, and what experience was your favorite that you've created for any one of your clients and what made it so special, because sometimes we just need need ideas and inspiration. So Shenandoah will be our inspiration today.
I mean, favorite is so hard, especially as you get more and more under your belt. But I think it's the ones that, when you get the feedback of this was amazing. I know like I said, I've always worked in-house doing events. And I think sometimes it's the ones that you don't necessarily expect. Like, for example, years ago, we did an event that was when Frozen 2 came out, and
Mhm.
it was for our partners and they could invite their families. And I said to my coworker, I'm like, they do know we're not sending them to Disney, right? Like, people were clamoring for these tickets. And I think just doing things that are like unexpected, I think, especially in corporate, sometimes allowing people to bring their families really made such a difference because people want to show off their work friends and
Yeah.
their families and
Mhm.
get those special experiences together. You always hear about each other so much. And so, when the Elsa comes in the room and the little girls like who are dressed like Elsa, freak out, that like that's so exciting. And then I think also when you can surprise someone. So
Mhm.
my most recent, like, biggest event that I did was our user conference, and we had robot dancers come out at the beginning. And just
Oh,
like when the room goes dark and everyone's like, is this supposed to happen? Is this
like
supposed
what's
to happen? And
happening?
then the music comes on and the lights, like, so I don't know that I could pick a specific event, but I think it's about like the little moments or the big moments along the way that you're like, oh, like when you got those chills from like the dancers coming on, or the Elsa in the room. And I've done some with celebrity, like a lot of hockey players, and people
Oh
are
yeah.
like meeting their dream hockey player, and like just
Oh.
they get so excited, and giving people an experience that they might not otherwise get and get to
Mhm.
talk about. I think, yeah, I don't know that I could pick a favorite event. Even when I saw your question before we recorded, I'm like, oh no, I don't know that I can do it. But I think it's just about those experiences where you say, hey, remember that time we did this and it was
Mhm.
it was crazy. We did the dueling pianos or the circus act that no one was
Yeah.
expecting to come down from the ceiling. It's all the little moments that build up to be like, oh, that was amazing.
Yeah, I love you said a few key things like building the unexpected into your event, and also just being aware and adding those little special touches to an event too can definitely help just create a memorable moment for clients. So it reminds me of a couple books that we read in our book club. I think Power of Moments and Unreasonable Hospitality, but it definitely speaks to just being hospitable, doing the unexpected, and how that can just light up everyone's world that you're planning for. It's kind
For
of
sure.
cool, huh? Just to create that feeling in your
Yeah.
clients.
And I was joking with a coworker the other day because she works closely with us, but she's not on the events team. And she's always like, well, what are we doing for this? And what are we doing for that? And I'm like, you need to let some things be a surprise. And she's like, but I want to know. Like, she's so excited. And I was like, no, it's not as fun. Right? So
Yeah.
sometimes the anticipation of like, ooh,
Mhm.
what are we gonna do for this year's event and all those things. But sometimes the anticipation is just as fun when they know that you've got something up your sleeve, but they haven't quite figured out what it is.
Yeah, and you kind of have to keep that. I mean, in
Yeah,
Unreasonable Hospitality, they talk about, they had, let's say, this contingency fund or this budget line item for just surprises. And I think that's really something to also have in event experiences too, because when people know you're going to surprise them, they always try to like over engineer like
yeah,
the surprise. And you just need that something, just keep something away just to
yeah,
surprise them. I think it really helps the experience.
for sure.
It really does. So I just also I would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about what you do for your podcast. So for those of you who don't know, Shenandoah is the host of her very own podcast. It's called Beyond the BEO. And I would love it if you could just tell everyone about your podcast and what kind of discussions that you have there.
Sure. So thanks so much. Yeah, I've been doing the podcast for about a year and a half now, and it really kind of bore out of just wanting to have these types of conversations and I'm a huge podcast listener, so it seemed like a natural progression. And over there, talking a lot about corporate events, how to make great attendee experiences, how to really make an impact with your career. I think that's kind of my biggest thing right now, is how can especially corporate event planners really show that they're making an impact. And we drive a lot of results in a business. And so how are we kind of proving that and
Right.
showing everyone, and conversations about what's next. And
Yeah.
it is an exciting time in the industry. So how sometimes it's more technical, like how do you include video and not blow your budget, and then sometimes it's more about the impact and the feeling and the excitement of the event's career.
Yeah, well, that's great. You're doing a great work over there. So
Thank you.
for anyone that's listening, definitely go over to Beyond the BEO, and she's everywhere. When you just type that in, you can you'll definitely see it, and go ahead and follow that event podcast too. You'll have to support each other. So
Thank you.
definitely. So speaking of advice for event professionals and just about their careers, if you were to give, let's say, one piece of advice to event professionals that are currently growing their career, because I know we do have a lot of people that are newly entering this space, or they are getting these advancements in the event career, what piece of advice would you give to event professionals?
I think if I could only give one, would be keep the receipts. So I would say, if you get an email from someone saying this was amazing, or you get survey feedback that, showed the impact that the event had, or just any kind of feedback, I think, it's so easy, especially if you're in a corporation, you're probably doing an annual review, semi-annual review, and it's really easy to be really busy and then get to December and be like, well, what did I do this year?
Right.
So keeping those receipts of either the shout outs that you got, maybe in a Slack channel, I know is big at my company, emails that you might have received, and then the data, right? So if it is revenue driving events, how are you tracking that and making sure that you're including that? And I think that really makes it easier when you go to write those things. It makes it easier when you're asking for a promotion or for a raise or for more responsibility to say, here's some examples of things that I've done, because quite honestly, our bosses and our teams, they get busy, right? And we kind of focus on what we're doing, and it's easy to lose sight of what the other person's doing, especially if they're doing it well. And I think like that would be my one piece of advice, is keep anything like that. I keep it in a little Outlook folder that I just shove it in there. And then every 6 months I go in and say, okay, what's in here? What do I want to highlight or share with my manager or with my HR team or whoever? And that'll really help you kind of build your profile within your organization. It'll help you build your profile externally, depending on what your career goals are.
Yeah, I love that. I think I wrote a blog post long ago, called it a smile file.
Yeah.
And just
I like that. I'm going to change my Outlook to say smile file.
Smile file. But I agree, because even when you're, let's say, trying to change a career and trying to, let's say, move to a different role that may not be in your organization, sometimes it's hard to think of like, how much did I increase the revenue for that event, or just whatever it be. Sometimes those simple things that you could be keeping track of as you go, it becomes so much harder later. So
For sure.
I definitely agree with you. Keep all those things on hand and have it all documented, so it can be easy to show what you're worth and how much value you bring. So thank you so much for that. Before we wrap up, I would love it if you had anything else that you would like to share before we wrap up.
I just think, like, let's just keep having these conversations. Let's keep learning from each other. Starting the podcast not only was to put my podcast out there, but it was to selfishly learn from others. And it opened a network of people that I probably wouldn't have found if I hadn't, put myself out there. So I think, let's keep supporting each other. Let's keep sharing those ideas. We're a collaborative and connection based industry. So let's just keep doing that. And I think it's an exciting time to be in the industry. If you're here in 2023 or you're just starting out, this is the time to be in it. It's exciting and there's so much opportunity, and I'm excited to see what's next for all of us.
This is the time. Yes, yes. So I have just a small little tradition that I do with guests is have some rapid fire questions at the end. So no one knows, Shanondoah does not know what questions that I'm going to bring at her today. But if you're ready, I have 4 questions that I wanted to ask you.
Let's do it.
Okay. So first one, what is your go-to travel accessory?
Go-to travel, airplanes.
Okay.
So airplanes, I get really, really bad, like plugged ears on airplanes, like to the point that I'm like nearly in tears. And when I started traveling a lot for work, I'm like, there's got to be a better way. Airplanes change my flying experience. They're like little silicone things. They're not the sexiest travel accessory, but I do not travel without them. They don't really all of it, but they definitely make such a difference. They're like $15 on Amazon. My changed my travel experience. That is my go-to travel accessory.
Yeah, because we don't need tears when we're traveling.
No, and it was brutal. And sometimes like I'll be on, if I'm back to back on a flight, like my ears still haven't cleared from the day before. Like I can still be having issues.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So if you get clogged ears on airplanes is the way to do it.
That's wow. Yes, I'm so glad that you got them. We don't want you in pain for days. That's just crazy. My next question is, what professional development book would you most recommend?
Most recommend, I would say Brag Better. I think that one kind of flies under the radar. There's lots of other ones that are very popular, but Brag Better, Meredith, I believe her last name's Feynman, but definitely Meredith's her first name. You can look it up. It is targeted. It is very helpful, I think, for most women, but it is not only written for women. But it's about, kind of the idea of the win folder, how to present yourself in a professionally bragging way and not using bragging as a bad word. Bragging, in her book, the summary is kind of bragging is facts. And so you're just telling people facts about what you've done. And so not underselling yourself, being truthful, not, when someone says, oh, it was, it's so great that you've gotten this far, or that you've done this, and not just saying, oh, I got lucky, right? It's really saying, oh no, it's because I did X, Y, and Z that I'm here. So I would say Brag Better. I feel like not enough people know that one. So
I didn't even know that one. So I will definitely put that one on my list too.
Perfect.
So next one is, what is your favorite way to cut costs while planning an event?
I think being honest about how much food you really need. I've been saying, like, do we really need a full-size break between breakfast and lunch when breakfast and lunch are like less than 3 hours apart? Do we need to have a full other spread of, a protein and I get having like some snacks around and like things that are easy to grab and go. But I think sometimes we get a little too excited with the amount of food that we have at an event and the amount of meals that people will actually consume in a day. And I'm not saying eliminate the break food. I love break food. It's usually my favorite food of the day. But we probably don't need the crudité and chips and cookies and goodness knows what else at 10 in the morning. That would be like, really evaluate and learn your attendees. So my company, they eat all of the salad. All of the salad and all of the fruit is always gone at my events. In previous rules, I'd be like pushing the salad. I'd be like, guys, come on, please, like we've got to eat this salad. So I think, obviously that's harder to know in your first time around, but learning those things of, oh, okay, this is a salad heavy company, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but it's true, right? You getting to know the patterns that your people are going to actually eat and what are the things they don't eat. I did one event where the team was really mad that I had pasta. They're like, pasta is so unhealthy. And then the caterer said to me, I've never seen anyone eat pasta as quickly and as much as your team did.
Oh,
So,
wow.
learning those things, not the
Exactly.
salad crowd. So I think learning, do they really need that much coffee in the afternoon?
Mhm.
Maybe it's not a type of coffee heavy. So using that to manage your budget and make it more accurate as much as possible also helps avoid food waste.
Yeah, it's such a good one because even it's just so sad sometimes to see all the food leave when the hotel has to take it or the venue has to take it away. It's like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, it's just way too much food sometimes. So
Yeah.
that's definitely a good one. Finally, what are you currently binge watching or, just watching on Netflix or whatever your favorite platform is?
Oh, I watch, I was like, this is so embarrassing. I watch a lot of TLC programming, like a lot of
Okay.
90 Day Fiance. Now they have Match Me Abroad. I love to
Okay.
turn on television and turn my brain off. Every once in a while, I'll also watch something that's true crime, but my husband doesn't really like it. So then I have to watch it
I've
by
heard a lot of good
myself.
things about that show. Yeah.
Yeah, 90 Day Fiance, it's so like, and there's so many seasons, and it's
Mhm.
it's one of those shows that, like, if you start doing something else and you come back, it doesn't matter, you didn't miss anything. Right? So
Turn the
that
brain
is
off,
really
be
what I
on it
watch
all day.
to watch the most often. And I did just start Jury Duty, which everyone
Okay.
is talking about, and I don't know how to feel about it yet, so
All right.
we'll see.
Well, sounds good because there's always everyone that wants to get into another show to binge watch. So there you go. You have a couple of them to check out, the Shenandoah. So, well, thank you again for being here on the Planners on Purpose podcast. For those that want to get in touch or, go to your podcast, why don't you just tell us quickly how to reach out to you?
For sure. So I'm on Instagram at Beyond the BEO. I'm also on LinkedIn. It's Shanondoah Nicholson. There's not many of us, so I'm pretty easy to find. Happy to connect on either of those platforms. I'm there pretty often. So thank you so much for having me on the show. Really appreciated our conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much. We will see you soon.